All right, so anyone who's been following us knows that we like to dive into some pretty complex topics. And today is no exception.
Yeah.
We're looking at the situation in Ukraine.
Right.
And for this deep dive, we're looking at an article from Social Europe.
Okay.
It's called Ukraine, Putin ante Portas and Trump in the White House.
Interesting title.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it was written by Frank Hofer.
Okay.
And this article was published on December 6th, 2024.
Very recent.
Very recent, so very relevant to what's going on right now.
Absolutely.
And it's pretty intense, I gotta say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that really jumped out at me was this idea that to actually end this war in Ukraine,
Okay.
the only way to really do that might be to put Western boots on the ground.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is,
Yeah.
and that's what we're gonna unpack with our expert today.
Well, the author, Frank Hofer, he doesn't beat around the bush.
Yeah.
He lays out a very stark reality.
Right.
Over 1,000 days of war.
Yeah, it's been going on for so long.
Massive destruction.
Heartbreaking, really.
It is. And he argues that just sending more weapons isn't the answer. He thinks that Western troops would completely change the game.
That's a huge step, though.
It is.
Is he saying that's the only way for Ukraine to win?
Not necessarily. I think he's presenting it as a way to really force a negotiation.
Okay.
You know, one that's actually favorable to Ukraine. Because right now they're negotiating from a position of weakness.
Right.
And the longer this drags on, the weaker they get.
And that's with billions in aid already from the West.
Well, but he argues that that aid has been kind of piecemeal.
Okay.
He talks about this spiral of escalation where each side feels like they have to keep upping the ante.
Yeah, I can see that.
And he says the West is hesitant to fully commit.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that fear of sparking a wider war.
Absolutely.
Especially with the nuclear threats, you know?
Right.
It's got to be weighing heavily on everyone's minds.
It is.
Yeah.
And the author actually addresses that directly. Okay. He talks about this growing nonchalance towards nuclear risks among some people who are very pro-Ukraine.
So they think Putin's bluffing.
Basically.
Yeah.
But Hofer's point is, every time a threat is made and nothing happens, it just makes it more likely that Russia might actually use them.
If they feel cornered enough.
Exactly.
It's a terrifying thought.
It is a very high-stakes game.
And the human cost is just horrific.
It is truly awful.
Does the article talk about that at all?
Yeah, he focuses on how exhausted Ukrainian forces are.
Makes sense.
How they're struggling to recruit new soldiers.
Wow.
There are even reports of desertions.
Really?
And he contrasts that with Putin,
right,
who has access to soldiers from other authoritarian regimes.
So he's basically saying Ukraine is running out of manpower.
Yes, and that they can't sustain this forever.
That makes the idea of needing Western troops hit even harder.
It does.
But realistically, sending troops is a political nightmare.
It is.
Right.
Yeah, he speculates about maybe limited involvement.
Okay.
You know, trainers, technical support, maybe even private contractors. But he admits full-scale deployment is probably not going to happen.
So if troops are off the table, what's the alternative?
Well, this is where the article takes a really fascinating turn.
Okay.
He suggests that Zelensky, seeing what's happening on the battlefield and factoring in Trump's return to the White House.
Wait, hold on. Back up.
Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah.
What does he have to do with this?
Well, the article argues that Trump's presidency,
as controversial as it was?
Yeah, as controversial as it was, could actually present a unique opportunity for a ceasefire.
Okay.
You know, Trump's all about deal-making.
Right.
Hofer thinks he would offer Putin a choice. A ceasefire where Russia keeps the territory it's taken.
Okay.
Or a massive escalation of the war.
That's a risky gamble.
Yeah.
How could anyone predict Putin's reaction?
Exactly. That's the wild card.
Yeah.
Hofer points out that Trump is famously unpredictable.
That's one way to put it.
And that could make Putin wary.
Okay.
But it could also make him desperate enough to strike a deal.
So high-stakes poker, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
But even if a ceasefire happens, then what?
Yeah.
What happens to Ukraine?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about next.
Okay, this is getting good.
Yeah, it's a fascinating article.
I can't wait to hear more.
We're just scratching the surface here.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more of this deep dive. So we're talking about a global chess game here.
Right.
With unbelievably high stakes.
Yeah.
And in this scenario, the article paints Trump as this, like, unpredictable wild card.
Right. He says that this kind of high-pressure negotiation would play right into Trump's strengths, or at least how Xi sees his strengths as a deal maker.
But wouldn't that be terrifying for everyone else? I mean, we all remember how Trump handled international agreements.
Right.
Let's just say subtlety wasn't his strong suit.
That's exactly the point the author makes.
Right.
He says that unpredictability could actually work in favor of a ceasefire.
Okay.
It might be the one thing that pushes Putin to seriously consider a deal.
Okay.
Simply because the alternative could be even more chaotic.
So fear as a motivator for peace.
Yeah.
Not exactly a heartwarming thought.
No, not really, but...
Okay, so let's say for the sake of argument,
yeah,
this crazy scenario plays out. A ceasefire is actually reached.
Okay.
Then what?
Well,
what happens to Ukraine?
That's where the article gets really into the details. Looking at what a post-ceasefire Ukraine might look like.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be pretty.
Oh.
Ukraine would have to make some big concessions.
Like what?
Likely giving up territory that's currently held by Russia.
Yeah, I imagine that would be a tough pill to swallow. For Zelensky and the Ukrainian people.
Absolutely.
After fighting so hard for so long.
Yeah, but the author argues that Zelensky might see it as the least bad option.
Okay.
You know, a way to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
Secure some kind of future for an independent Ukraine.
And how would that future be secured?
Right.
We talked about NATO membership being unlikely, so what are the alternatives?
Well, the article explores a few possibilities.
Okay.
One is a strong security partnership.
Okay.
With major European powers.
Yeah.
And the U.S.
Okay.
Something with real teeth.
So not just vague promises?
Exactly.
But would that be enough to deter Russia? I mean, they already broke the Budapest Memorandum,
right,
which was supposed to guarantee Ukraine's security.
That's a valid concern, and the author acknowledges that any security guarantees would have to be ironclad with clear consequences for Russia if they violate them.
So what, like?
He even suggests the need for permanent Western military bases in Ukraine.
Oh.
Potentially even a peacekeeping force.
That's a huge commitment.
It is.
Would the West really go that far?
It's hard to say, but the author argues that the alternative, a conflict that could flare up again at any moment, would be even more costly and dangerous in the long run.
So it comes down to whether the West sees this as like a one-time investment or an open-ended commitment to propping up Ukraine indefinitely.
Exactly, and that's where the economic aspect comes into play.
Okay.
The article suggests that Europe in particular would need to step up financially to make any of this work.
We're talking serious money.
Yeah. Massive aid packages for reconstruction.
Okay.
Economic support. Ongoing military assistance.
It would be a lot.
It would be a heavy lift.
And not just for Europe, right?
No.
This whole scenario hinges on the U.S. under Trump.
Right.
Playing a major role.
Yes.
Can you really see that happening?
Well, it would definitely be a big change from current U.S. policy. But remember, Trump has always seen himself as this master negotiator.
Right. Yeah.
The guy who can make deals others can't.
Yeah.
He might see this as a chance to score a big foreign policy win. You know, something to brag about on the campaign trail.
It all sounds incredibly risky.
It is?
And fragile.
Yeah.
But is there even a chance it could work?
The article doesn't offer any guarantees.
Okay.
It lays out a potential path. But it acknowledges that it's a path filled with uncertainties and potential pitfalls.
Yeah.
It all depends on a lot of factors. Putin's calculations.
Okay.
Zelensky's willingness to compromise.
Yeah.
Trump's unpredictable nature.
Of course.
The level of support from Europe and the international community.
So a lot of ifs and maybes.
A lot of them.
But the fact that someone is even thinking about these possibilities, trying to map out a route to peace, that's encouraging in itself, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that even in the darkest of times, there are always people working behind the scenes, searching for solutions, trying to find a way out of the abyss.
And sometimes, even the most unlikely scenarios can become reality.
It's true.
I mean, who could have predicted back in 2023 that we'd be talking about Donald Trump brokering a peace deal in Ukraine in 2024?
It's a strange world.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
The article touches on the potential role of other global players, like India, Brazil, South Africa, and China.
Right.
How could they influence the situation?
This is where things get even more complicated.
Oh, great.
The author suggests that these countries, while not directly involved in the conflict, could exert significant pressure on both Russia and the West.
Interesting.
They have their own interest to protect.
Of course.
And they're not necessarily aligned with either side.
So they could be potential spoilers?
They could.
Or they could be facilitators? Right.
Depending on how they play their cards.
Exactly. For example, China has been walking a tightrope, offering rhetorical support for Russia while trying to avoid direct economic entanglement with the conflict.
So playing it safe?
Yeah. But if they sense an opportunity to advance their own interests, they could shift their stance.
And what about India? They've been buying discounted Russian oil throughout the war.
And that's given them leverage.
Yeah.
The author suggests that India could use its economic ties with Russia to encourage them to negotiate seriously, or they could continue to play both sides, benefiting from the situation as it stands.
It sounds like every player in this game has their own motivations.
They do.
Their own agenda.
Absolutely.
It's hard to keep track of it all.
That's geopolitics for you.
Yeah.
It's a complex web of relationships, interests, and power dynamics.
Yeah. And in a situation like the Ukraine conflict, where the stakes are so high, every move has consequences.
I'm starting to get a headache just thinking about it all.
Yeah.
But it's important to understand these complexities, right?
It is.
If we want to make sense of what's happening and what might happen next.
Absolutely.
We need to look beyond the headlines and try to grasp the bigger picture.
I agree, and that's why I think this article is so valuable.
Okay.
It challenges us to think critically, to question our assumptions, and to engage with the nuances of this incredibly complex situation.
It's definitely given us a lot to chew on.
It has.
So to bring it back to the listener, you, the person trying to understand this tangled web, what are the key takeaways here? What should you be paying attention to as this situation unfolds?
Right.
So it seems like the old saying, all roads lead to Rome, might need an update.
Yeah.
In this case, all roads seem to lead through, well, maybe not through Trump, but definitely past Trump.
Yeah, the author makes it clear that any potential resolution, whether it's this wild ceasefire idea or something else entirely, is going to be heavily influenced by the political landscape in Washington.
Right.
And with Trump back in the White House. That landscape is anything but predictable.
It's like trying to navigate a minefield blindfolded.
Yeah.
You never know when something's going to blow up in your face.
But the article also suggests that this unpredictability might actually create an opening.
An opening for
Putin. Facing his own set of challenges.
Right.
He might be more willing to cut a deal with someone as volatile as Trump. Simply because he can't calculate the risks. It's a dangerous game for sure.
Yeah.
But it could be the only game in town.
So what you're saying is the very things that make Trump so unsettling on the world stage, his impulsiveness, his disregard for norms, might actually be the keys to unlocking a peace deal in Ukraine.
It's possible.
That's a pretty mind-blowing thought.
It is, and it speaks to the complex nature of international relations.
Yeah.
Sometimes the most unconventional players can shake things up in unexpected ways.
Yeah.
Whether that leads to positive or negative outcomes is another question entirely.
And the article doesn't shy away from the potential downsides.
No, it doesn't.
It acknowledges that any deal brokered by Trump would likely be deeply unpopular in many quarters.
Especially in Europe.
Yeah.
The author points out that European leaders are already wary of Trump's America First approach.
Yeah.
And they'd be understandably hesitant to trust him with something as sensitive as a Ukraine peace agreement.
But wouldn't they be desperate for peace at this point? No. Surely they'd be willing to compromise, even if it meant working with someone they don't like.
I think that's the calculation the author's making.
He
argues that Europe, facing its own economic woes and growing war fatigue, might have no choice but to go along with whatever deal Trump can hammer out.
Which could put them in a really awkward position.
It could.
They'd be stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
On the one hand, they want to support Ukraine and stand up to Russian aggression. On the other hand, they're dependent on the U.S. for security and don't want to alienate Trump.
It's a tough spot, no doubt.
Yeah.
And it highlights the difficult choices facing all the players in this conflict.
Right.
There are no easy answers.
Yeah.
No win-win scenarios.
It's messy. Every path forward comes with risks.
Absolutely.
And trade-offs.
This whole conversation has been one big reality check, honestly.
Yeah.
It's tempting to think in terms of good guys and bad guys.
Right.
But the reality is so much messier than that.
Yeah.
Everyone is acting in their own self-interest. And those interests often clash.
That's the essence of realpolitik, right?
It is.
And the Ukraine conflict is a stark reminder that the world doesn't always operate according to our ideals.
Sometimes the best we can hope for is a solution that minimizes harm, even if it doesn't satisfy everyone.
Okay, so circling back to our listener.
Right.
What are the key takeaways from this deep dive? Yeah. What should they keep in mind as they follow this story moving forward?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the situation in Ukraine is incredibly fluid and complex.
Okay.
There are a lot of moving parts, a lot of powerful players with competing agendas.
And predicting the outcome is next to impossible.
Pretty much, right.
Anyone who claims to know how this will all play out is either lying or delusional.
Or both.
The best we can do is try to understand the various perspectives, the potential scenarios.
And the factors that could tip the scales in one direction or another.
And always be prepared for the unexpected.
Especially with someone like Trump involved.
Right.
He's a wild card.
He is.
A disruptor. And his actions could completely upend the existing order. For better or worse.
It's both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time.
It really is, but one thing's for sure.
Yeah.
This story is far from over.
No, it isn't.
It's going to continue to dominate headlines and shape global politics for years to come.
And as we've seen, even the most outlandish scenarios can't be ruled out. The author's idea of a Trump-brokered ceasefire, while highly speculative, is a reminder that we need to be open to all possibilities.
Okay.
Even those that seem improbable.
Right.
Or even unpalatable.
So to our listener out there, buckle up. The ride's about to get even wilder.
And stay informed.
Yeah.
Because in a world as complex and volatile as ours,
knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
The more you understand the forces at play, the better equipped you'll be to navigate the challenges ahead.
All right, that's a wrap on our deep dive into this fascinating and honestly quite unsettling article on the Ukraine conflict. Hopefully you've come away with a better understanding of the complexities involved and the high stakes for everyone on the global stage.
Absolutely.
As always, we encourage you to continue exploring this topic, digging deeper into the different perspectives and forming your own conclusions. And who knows, maybe you'll even come up with your own wild theory. How this all ends.
It's a fascinating topic.
It is.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Thanks for having me.